This is Eric Van Buskirk, and it's the second video that I am doing to show how to use the results from doing some very in-depth analysis of how words are related, semantically related, according to Google, by examining their search engine result pages. So I've now moved over to a different Excel sheet where I'm going to try and find ways of creating content and taking advantage of what we know, what we learned. At this point, I actually do not really care about the landing pages. That's where I've helped find the information. I'm going to sort of take them out of the equation. And this is what's challenging, is thinking about how do you pull this information together. I started with using two important metrics, and then the most important one from the proximity, the amount of association to our core words. So that's really three things that I'm using here. And then actually, as I did this, a lot of subjective judgments. And I think that's the way this is going to have to go, is that somebody with a lot of SEO experience has got to create the outline of the piece that's going to be written. So the first thing I looked at was search volume. So the first thing I looked at was the cost per click. And so basically now what I have is I have everything on top is the most valuable and probably the most competitive. And then I think search volume, of course, is important for a number of reasons here. Although in this particular case, these words are not very competitive. Well, in the sense of search volume, I think some of these probably are, in fact, competitive to rank for. And especially, I guess some of these 590s. I mean, semantic web, it only has 590 searches, but it's a two-word search, and there's just got to be a lot of content for something like that. So then what I did is I started with an extra column of some general ideas from the keywords, and I had already used yellow and gray and nothing to indicate what I wanted to do with these. So yellow, I decided were words that I want to take advantage of. White, I was kind of neutral about. Gray, I was a way of saying I'm just not even going to really think about this very much, although all of these are interesting looked at together by the person that's going to have to write this. Here's an obvious one. I mean, you're not going to put a misspelling in here, two words together. I had different reasons for this. This one is just incomplete. I mean, Web 3 doesn't mean much. Web 3 .0 technologies would be useful. So, yeah, I could have used that, but I think I also saw that people were using other ways of defining that. And one thing, I did not do so much because I felt like I could eyeball it, was to weight the number of times things are appearing that are very similar, but a certain idea that's semantically related, like this 3.0. This comes up a lot, and again, the person that's creating this, unless they're a subject matter expert, they are not going to even know that. I mean, I didn't know that Web 3.0 was so closely associated with the semantic web. I read that before, but I forgot. So. So I went over here and I started thinking about, well, how am I going to use these things? And I'm just each iteration I'm creating a new call. And so in this iteration, actually, I think mostly what I did was I started some of these things I darkened because I said, you know what, that's just not as useful. A lot of these, what I did was I just took I bolded the idea and I didn't use the sort of the part of the core or the stem that if you were to use this, you'd just it'd be like keyword stuff and you'd be saying the same thing over and over again. So you'll see that's really was the main thing I was doing here. I love this, by the way. This had a really pretty high score, 9 occurrences, and out of most of these, I think the highest that you could have was 12, or that I saw, I should say. It was probably 15 landing pages. I did not do as deep a dive on the number of landing pages. It really needs to be more like 30, and I'll be able to do that soon because I'm just finishing up some development work on the API modules that I use to do this. But I would have forgotten. As I recall now, I think Tim Berners-Lee was really big on this concept of what the semantic web is this idea, and it's like this amorphous thing that grows from things being related from people's, hyperlinking, I guess, is a big part of it in the way they hyperlink. So, so you can see that I just did different iterations. W3C comes up a few times. That's really interesting. And so a lot of this is informing me as somebody that's going to create the content, or the SEO that's going to help create it, to really remember and not forget anything to write about. But it should be more than that, right? Because we actually have scores of what's most related, and we see certain things appear more than others. So at this point, I started. This is almost more like notes in this column. So tools, we've got to talk about tools somewhere. And then so here are some notes. I said, I noticed that, a couple of these things that score high, and actually they're also, in this case, a lot of money. And it helps you understand why they're a lot of money. It's because somebody's searching for SI keywords. That's an abbreviation that, who knew that they use an acronym for like semantic indexing? Because it can't be anything else, right? What else is SI keywords? And that's why people are spending a ton of money for that. SEO, you want to have that somewhere in there. What is, and so I think, there's a couple things here. What is the semantic web? It's like a proper name. And I believe I think it's something that like Tim Berners-Lee came up with that had to do with the very concepts that this thing is going to be this living creature is going to be created that has these relationships. Also, what is it related to search in general? This is again there's so much to do with web search that's an important thing to get at there. For over here we have tool. This was pretty vague. I don't know what somebody's thinking about tool latent semantic indexing, but I'm just also recognizing how many times certain things appear, like here's tool and here's tool. So got to pay attention to that and make a note over here. And this is the process. How is it done? Right? So that's another one that came up high, and I made it yellow. How is Google doing this? Want to talk about that. And then defining, as I kind of said, the semantic web versus semantic web, the idea that there's a definition that a lot of people have thought about as to what is the semantic web. And then, again, we have these acronyms. And again, we have people bidding high on them. Who knew? So I want to use them as keywords, and I want to talk about them. This is cool. Probably this is the best known search engine for semantic relationships. It's not looking at Google, so it's not able to backwards engineer as the technique that I'm doing. But hey, definitely want to talk about this. It comes up a lot. It's got value here. It's got searches. It's related. And then tool, relating to keyword here. WordPress, I don't know. That's a little bit of I don't quite understand why that had co-occurrences that were pretty relevant, but it did. So, just mention it as a CMS perhaps somewhere in here. And, I guess I'm not going to go into all of these notes, but I think that you begin to see that with this column, I've created an outline that can be passed off to the writer. Maybe I'm an SEO that's good enough at writing that I can have done these steps and then actually move on and do the writing. Or maybe I need to give even more notes. Obviously this is not enough, these notes I have here. So who knows? Audio, audio, talking about the notes to the person that's going to write it or something like that. Maybe you have a good way of organizing this. But so over here I have defining what the versus not using the means. And that's again connected to the semantic web. These things keep coming up. And also there's a lot of questions. You'll notice that a lot of these words, there's questions about what does it mean? What is it? Probably more than you would be used to seeing for things that are better known, that more people know about, like certain products. No one's going to say, what is a Pontiac Firebird? They know the general idea, but a lot of people are completely new to these concepts. So, you have to think about that. If you want to create these pages, if you want it to be for a lot of brand new users, you've got to introduce that the whole definitions and using these words like what is and definition, tagging, indexing, related. Technologies appears a couple times and a couple ways. I would use these exact words: search technologies related to it, web technologies related to it. And Google, it's weird. Actually, I think Google LSI did not appear very much, but that was a kind of Google just didn't appear as much as I expected it to, quite frankly. And then here's this 3.0. So I made this note. What is that? I would look at Wikipedia for some of these things, actually. And then the design came up. And to me, like, people still looking for design. Again, they're looking for, like, is there an intent behind these connections? The next part of, I guess, writing a draft of some web pages is going to have a heck of a lot to do with either a client's website or your website. I would say that, if it was a really big authority site, like a newsy site that's a tech site, I would go for trying to rank 2 pages on really competitive words, and then you're going to rank for all these long tail words as well. I mean, that's what you probably know, is that Google's ranking 1 page for many long tails, whereas in the past it would do many pages for many pages for the many long tail versions. I think, though, if it's a site that in the subject matter you're researching here that's not as authoritative, maybe break it down a little bit and maybe create even more content if you need to. I mean, if this is a subject that is like, 1/4 of what the website is about. So, there would seem to be enough here to write, at least 4 pages, or at least 3. I would think there's 3,000 words of writing in here. Maybe not necessarily, you wouldn't, maybe you have 3 500 word pages here, and, you organize what you want to talk about, organize this a little bit more and put this together a little bit more. But yeah, it is subjective, but I think the weighting as you're creating these notes and you're figuring out what words to use and you're doing your traditional SEO, which is really what a lot of it is about at this point, the weighting helps you determine how you want to use things. And I would just say in the end too, I mean, this is really just traditional use of keywords, and you're using the scores of some of these words and some of this additional information to help inform how you want to create the content. But it just shouldn't be considered as anything other than, a keyword research list. It's not really a list. It's a lot more sophisticated. It's searchable. That's far more advanced. And this is only having done like 15 landing pages. It's a pretty small one. So thanks very much. And if you're watching this, I hope I get to talk to you at some point. Thanks.